Think about the last time you were in a crowded room, perhaps a staff meeting, a family dinner, or a casual gathering with acquaintances, and you felt a sudden urge to laugh, speak up, or share an unconventional idea. But right before the words could leave your mouth, an internal filter slammed shut. Your heart rate spiked slightly, your throat tightened, and you quickly calculated how those words might be received. Within a fraction of a second, you adjusted your posture, cleared your throat, and nodded along with everyone else instead, offering a safe, agreeable comment that mirrored the room. We do this so smoothly, so automatically, that we barely notice it happening anymore. It has become our default setting. We wear a carefully constructed mask designed to blend in, to please, and to protect ourselves from the critical, evaluating eyes of others. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung called this the persona, the social face we put on to navigate the world, survive within our communities, and fit into our professional structures. The persona is not inherently evil. It is a necessary psychological tool. It helps us cooperate, stay polite, and function smoothly in a complex society. It keeps things predictable and comfortable for everyone around us. But it comes at a staggering, deeply hidden cost. When you spend all your day-to-day energy maintaining a flawless mask, the real you, the raw, unfiltered, and deeply genuine part of your psyche, begins to suffocate underneath it. We live in a world that constantly rewards the mask. We get praise for being agreeable. We get promotions for playing the expected corporate part. And we get social validation for echoing the popular opinions of our peer group. But notice what happens inside you during those moments of forced conformity. A quiet, heavy exhaustion begins to settle into your bones. You leave social interactions feeling drained rather than energized, empty rather than fulfilled. This fatigue is the direct result of the immense psychological friction required to suppress your true nature. You are actively working against yourself, using your own mental energy to hold down your authentic thoughts, your unique humor, and your genuine perspectives. Over time, this habit of self-suppression creates a profound internal division. You begin to experience a persistent sense of alienation, not from others, but from yourself. You look in the mirror after a long day of pleasing everyone else and realize you don't entirely recognize the person looking back. You have optimized your life to be liked by people whose opinions you might not even respect, while completely abandoning the one person who actually matters: yourself. The tragedy of the flawless mask is that it only protects an illusion. It secures a superficial acceptance for a character you are playing, while leaving your true self feeling entirely unseen, isolated, and unloved. After all, if people only love the mask, you can never truly feel loved for who you actually are. It is time to acknowledge how exhausting this game has become. It is time to recognize that the safety you think you are buying with your conformity is actually a prison of your own making. If you are ready to step out from behind that exhausting mask, stop performing for approval, and reclaim your true, authentic self today, leave a comment below right now saying, I am ready to live as my true self without fear. Let that statement be your anchor, a line in the sand for what we are about to uncover throughout this journey. From the moment we are young, we sign a silent agreement with the world around us. This contract is never printed on paper, and no one explicitly asks for our signature. Yet we learn its clauses by heart before we even know how to read. The terms are incredibly simple. If you behave the way we expect you to behave, we will reward you with acceptance. If you dress like us, talk like us, value the exact same things we value, and never disrupt the status quo, you will be safe from isolation. We learn this lesson in the classroom when a teacher frowns at an unusual question, in the playground when peers distance themselves from a non-conforming kid, and at the family dinner table when an unspoken boundary dictates what topics are safe to discuss. So, you learn to read the room with expert precision. You develop an acute sensitivity to the emotional atmosphere around you, becoming a psychological detective. You figure out exactly which parts of your personality get applause, validation, and warm smiles, and which parts get awkward silences, cold shoulders, or raised eyebrows. Slowly, piece by piece, day by day, you start editing your own script. You tuck away your unique quirks, your deep intensity, your unorthodox perspectives, and your artistic passions because they feel too risky to display. You lock them up in a dark corner of your mind, promising yourself you will only bring them out when it is completely safe. But that day never actually arrives. Instead, you become a master of anticipation. Before you speak, you scan the faces of your listeners, predicting their reactions and tailoring your words to match their expectations perfectly. You adopt the posture of your colleagues, copy the lifestyle choices of your neighbors, and swallow your disagreements to keep the water calm. If your social circle values wealth and status, you force yourself to pursue those exact things, even if your true self craves simplicity and creative freedom. If your family environment demands emotional stoicism, you choke back your vulnerability and force a smile. You convince yourself that this is just what it means to grow up, to be mature, and to adapt to the real world. But here is the structural flaw in that silent contract. It is a trap designed to keep you small. You are trading your actual living identity for a fragile, temporary imitation of peace. You spend your life walking on eggshells, monitoring your every breath, and policing your own mind just to maintain an illusion of safety that can be shattered by a single disapproving glance. This agreement demands that you betray yourself every single day just to buy the comfort of people who are often too caught up in their own performances to notice your sacrifice. You become a prisoner of the expectations you have agreed to fulfill, living a life that belongs to everyone else except the person inhabiting your skin. Here is the harsh, unyielding reality that we try so desperately to ignore, avoid, and negotiate our way out of every single day. No matter how perfectly you play the game, they will judge you anyway. You can spend your entire life studying the preferences of the people around you, refining your behavior, and polishing your delivery to be completely blameless, and you will still fail to please everyone. Human opinion is a shifting, unstable quicksand. If you are quiet, reserved, and careful with your words, people will call you arrogant, cold, or detached. If you choose to be expressive, enthusiastic, and open, those exact same people will label you as loud, dramatic, or attention-seeking. Look closely at the choices you make in your daily life and how the world responds to them. If you stay at your safe, predictable corporate job, people will whisper behind your back that you lack ambition, that you are stuck in a rut, and that you are settling for mediocrity. But if you take a massive leap of faith, follow your intuition, and start your own unconventional business, those same voices will suddenly change their tune, whispering that you are reckless, irresponsible, and self-absorbed. If you choose to live frugally, you are viewed as cheap. If you spend your money on things you enjoy, you are viewed as materialistic. There is no winning move in a game where the rules are entirely fabricated by the subjective biases of the spectators. You could literally spend your entire existence bending over backward, shifting your shape like a chameleon, and swallowing your deepest truths just to make other people feel comfortable, and someone will still find a reason to completely misunderstand you. They will misinterpret your kindness as weakness. They will mistake your boundaries for hostility. They will view your self-care as selfishness. When you finally grasp this truth deeply, it hits you with a heavy, jarring weight. But right behind that weight is an incredible sense of liberation. The realization that you cannot control the narrative in someone else's mind is the exact moment your freedom begins. Think of the staggering amount of mental bandwidth you have wasted trying to prevent people from thinking poorly of you. You have rehearsed conversations in your head, stressed over the phrasing of an email, and opted out of experiences you genuinely wanted to try, all to prevent a judgment that was likely going to happen regardless of what you did. If judgment is completely inevitable, then using it as a compass for how you live your life is a mathematical guarantee of misery. You are giving up your real, tangible life to chase a ghost. When you accept that disapproval is just an unavoidable background noise of the human experience, the opinions of others lose their power to dictate your steps. If they are going to judge you anyway, you might as well give them something authentic to look at. When someone looks at you, observes your choices, and passes a sharp judgment, it rarely has anything to do with who you actually are. Instead, their judgment is a mirror of their own internal world, their personal limitations, and their unresolved insecurities. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung noted that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When a person feels a sudden, intense surge of negativity toward your behavior, your clothes, your career path, or your boundaries, they are not interacting with you. They are interacting with their own psychological projection. They are casting their own inner shadow onto the canvas of your life. Think about how this plays out in everyday, relatable situations. Imagine a colleague at work who constantly makes passive-aggressive comments about your punctuality, your focus, or your ambition. Every time you speak up in a meeting with a fresh idea, they roll their eyes or find a way to minimize your contribution. It is incredibly easy to internalize that criticism and assume you are doing something wrong, that you are being too much, or that you are genuinely flawed. But if you take a step back and look beneath the surface, you often discover that this person is deeply frustrated with their own professional stagnation. They have denied themselves the permission to be bold, to take risks, or to speak up. And seeing you do it effortlessly acts as a painful reminder of their own self-imposed cage. The same dynamic occurs within families and long-term friendships. A friend who mocks your new lifestyle choice, whether it is a dedication to physical health, a new creative hobby, or a decision to step away from a toxic environment, might be drowning in insecurity about their own daily choices. Your growth forces them to look at their own lack of movement. If you stay the same, they feel comfortable. The moment you begin to change, evolve, and step into your true self, you disrupt the unspoken agreement of mediocrity. Your authenticity acts as a spotlight on their stagnation, and because looking at their own shadow is too painful, they choose to attack the spotlight instead. Once you realize that another person's criticism is just a projection of their own inner noise, the emotional weight of their judgment completely evaporates. It stops feeling so personal. You begin to see their harsh words or judgmental glances not as a reflection of your worth, but as an involuntary confession of their own internal struggles. This understanding changes your entire emotional response from defensive anger or self-doubt to a quiet, detached clarity. You no longer feel the need to argue, defend your choices, or alter your behavior to make them comfortable. You realize that you could be a flawless masterpiece, and someone who views the world through a cracked and dusty lens will still see you as distorted. Their lens is their responsibility, not yours. Every time you hide a part of yourself to avoid being judged, that rejected piece doesn't just vanish into thin air. It doesn't dissolve or cease to exist simply because you decided it was too inconvenient, too loud, or too risky to show to the world. Instead, that repressed aspect of your identity gets pushed down into the deeper, darker layers of your subconscious mind, into what is known psychologically as the shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the hidden custodian of our rejected selves, the place where we dump all the traits, desires, emotions, and impulses that we deem unacceptable because society, our family, our culture, or our peers didn't approve of them. We spent our formative years learning how to build a clean, presentable storefront while tossing everything else into the messy basement of our psyche. Think about how this psychological burial happens in real life. Imagine a child who is naturally full of fierce independence, raw passion, and an intense, booming voice. If that child grows up in an environment that constantly tells them to quiet down, stop being so dramatic, or blend into the background, they receive a clear, terrifying message. Your natural intensity threatens your safety and connection. To survive and maintain the love of their caregivers, that child slowly suffocates their passion. They tuck away their boldness and push it down into the shadow, replacing it with a quiet, overly agreeable persona. By the time they reach adulthood, they have completely forgotten that they ever possessed that fiery spark. They view themselves as naturally timid, never realizing that their strength is trapped beneath decades of social conditioning. The same tragic burial occurs with our boundaries, our anger, and our personal ambition. We are taught that good people never get angry, that civilized individuals always accommodate others, and that putting your own needs first is a sign of toxic selfishness. So, when you feel a valid surge of anger because someone stepped over your boundaries, you quickly swallow it down. You paste on a polite, compliant smile and pretend everything is fine. You push that valid frustration straight into your shadow. But here is the critical truth about the shadow that we must understand. The things we bury do not die. They do not sit quietly in the dark. Instead, they ferment, mutate, and gain a strange, chaotic energy of their own. When you repress your natural traits, they begin to leak out sideways in destructive ways that you can barely control. That swallowed anger doesn't disappear. It transforms into a persistent, low-grade, underlying anxiety that hums in the background of your daily life. It morphs into bitter, passive-aggressive comments, sudden bursts of irritability over tiny things, or a cynical attitude toward the world. Furthermore, a heavily packed shadow creates a profound, painful sense of envy and resentment toward people who are living freely. When you see someone online or in your workplace who speaks their mind without apology, takes bold, creative risks, or sets uncompromising boundaries, you might feel a sudden spike of intense dislike for them. You might criticize their style, mock their confidence, or label them as arrogant. But if you look closer, you will realize that your anger isn't directed at them. It is a manifestation of your own self-betrayal. Your shadow is screaming because it sees someone else giving themselves the exact permission that you have denied yourself for years. To break free from this internal prison and stop living in fear of judgment, you must be willing to do the uncomfortable work of shadow integration. You have to look into that basement, shine a light into the dark corners of your mind, and invite those hidden, rejected pieces back to the surface. You must recognize that the parts of you that were labeled as too much, too intense, too sensitive, or too difficult by a restrictive environment might actually be the exact sources of your vitality, your creativity, and your authentic power. Integrating the shadow means acknowledging your capacity for anger so you can finally use it to build firm, healthy boundaries. It means reclaiming your hidden ambition, your unique quirks, and your unconventional desires. This process requires immense psychological bravery because it forces you to accept the parts of yourself that others might find highly inconvenient or disruptive to the status quo. The people around you have grown very comfortable with your compliance, your quietness, and your predictability. When you begin to reclaim your shadow and bring your full, unedited self to the table, the dynamic will shift. But true wholeness is entirely impossible as long as you are actively amputating vital pieces of your identity just to keep the peace. You cannot live a life of genuine sovereignty while treating your own soul as something to be feared, hidden, and policed. Reclaiming your true self means standing up for the parts of you that you were once forced to abandon. Living a life dictated by the persistent, looming fear of judgment is not just a psychological burden. It is a physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausting way to exist. It requires an immense, continuous expenditure of internal energy just to keep yourself standing upright within the narrow boundaries of what you deem acceptable to the outside world. This process of constant self-editing operates like a heavy background program running on a computer. It silently drains your system's processing power, leaving you with little to no bandwidth for genuine creativity, spontaneous joy, or deep relaxation. When you are trapped in this cycle, every single waking moment becomes an exercise in hypervigilance, strategic calculation, and meticulous performance art. Think about how this exhaustion manifests in the mundane, seemingly insignificant moments of your daily life. Before you send a simple text message to a friend, a coworker, or a partner, you find yourself reading it over 5 times, adjusting the punctuation, swapping out words, and adding exclamation points just to make absolutely certain the tone is perfectly neutral, unthreatening, and entirely incapable of causing offense. Before you post a thought, an achievement, or a creative project online, you run a complex mental simulation to calculate exactly how your peers, your family, or your professional network will interpret it. You anticipate every possible misinterpretation, every potential critique, and every passive-aggressive reaction, editing yourself down until the final product is so safe, sanitized, and bland that it loses its original spark entirely. When you enter a social setting, whether it is a corporate boardroom, a casual dinner party, or even a gathering with lifelong friends, your mind doesn't allow you to simply arrive and exist. Instead, it launches an active, real-time scan of the room. You subconsciously read the facial expressions, the body language, and the underlying tension of the crowd. Within seconds, you automatically calibrate your internal settings to match the energetic baseline of the room. If the crowd is subdued, you swallow your enthusiasm. If the crowd is cynical, you hold back your genuine optimism. You adjust the volume of your voice, the nature of your laughter, and the complexity of your opinions to blend seamlessly into the environment. You become an expert chameleon, shifting your colors so rapidly that the people around you feel perfectly comfortable, while you grow increasingly hollow inside. This perpetual self-editing completely destroys your connection to your own intuition. When you spend years filtering your thoughts through the question, "What will they think of me?" you eventually lose the ability to know what you actually think. Your internal compass becomes entirely demagnetized by the collective opinions of the crowd. When someone asks for your perspective on a topic, you no longer feel a direct, authentic response arise from your core. Instead, your mind immediately rushes to calculate the safest answer, the one that will generate the least resistance and the maximum amount of agreement. You end up trapped in a state of chronic indecision, constantly seeking external validation for the smallest choices, because you no longer trust the validity of your own inner voice. The toll of this lifestyle is a profound, systemic fatigue that sleep can never fix. You leave social interactions feeling completely wiped out, not because you are antisocial, but because you just spent 3 hours executing a highly demanding theatrical performance. You have been acting as the director, the scriptwriter, and the lead actor of a character designed solely to please an audience. This exhaustion is the direct result of the unnatural friction required to actively suppress your true nature. You are working against your own psychological biology, using your own life force to cage your actual thoughts, your unique sense of humor, and your genuine perspectives. Ultimately, you end up looking in the mirror at the end of a long week of perfect compliance and wondering who is actually looking back at you. You look at your safe career, your agreeable relationships, and your curated social life, and you feel a strange, haunting sense of grief. The exhaustion you feel on a daily basis isn't coming from the actual work you do or the physical tasks you complete. It is the heavy, suffocating weight of pretending to be someone you are not. It is the cost of buying a fragile, superficial acceptance from the world by actively participating in the daily erasure of your own soul. To break completely free from this exhausting cycle of performance and fear, you must undergo a profound, fundamental psychological shift toward personal sovereignty. This is not a subtle adjustment to your daily routine or a simple trick of positive thinking. It is a radical reclamation of your internal territory. Personal sovereignty means deciding once and for all that your own evaluation of your life, your choices, and your character holds infinitely more weight than the opinions of the spectators sitting in the bleachers. It requires you to build a dense, unshakable internal center of gravity that cannot be easily tilted by the shifting winds of external approval or disapproval. Right now, if you are honest with yourself, your center of gravity is likely entirely external. It is lodged firmly and precariously in the minds of the people around you, your parents, your boss, your partner, your colleagues, or even anonymous faces on social media. When they smile at you, approve of your choices, or validate your hard work, your internal barometer rises, and you feel steady, capable, and worthy. But the moment they frown, offer a critique, deliver a passive-aggressive comment, or simply meet your efforts with cold indifference, your entire psychological structure tips over. You plunge into a spiral of self-doubt, anxiety, and frantic overcompensation. By living this way, you have essentially handed the remote control of your emotional well-being over to anyone who happens to glance your way. You have made yourself a psychological hostage to the subjective moods and biases of others. Reclaiming your sovereignty means reaching out into the world, grabbing that remote control, and pulling that center of gravity back inside your own chest. It is the deep cellular understanding that you are the ultimate, absolute authority on your own values, your decisions, and your path. This realization requires you to stop viewing yourself as a permanent child who constantly needs to check in with an authority figure to see if they are doing a good job. You have to step into the role of the mature adult who can look at a difficult situation, make a choice grounded in their own internal ethics, and willingly shoulder the consequences of that choice, regardless of whether the crowd cheers or boos. Think about how this shift alters your daily interactions. When you possess personal sovereignty, an uncomfortable interaction at work or a critical comment from a family member no longer has the power to ruin your entire week. When someone delivers a harsh judgment, a sovereign mind doesn't immediately internalize it as a factual truth. Instead, you observe the criticism with a calm, detached curiosity. You look at it and think, that is an interesting perspective, but it does not align with my reality, nor does it define my worth. You learn to separate other people's emotional reactions from your personal identity. If someone gets upset because you set a firm boundary or made a choice that serves your growth, you recognize that their discomfort is their own internal storm to navigate, not a structural flaw in your character that you are obligated to fix. This process of building internal sovereignty requires you to define your own metric for a successful life. As long as you are using society's pre-packaged template for success, you will always be a slave to judgment. You have to ask yourself the quiet, uncomfortable questions that you have been avoiding. What do I actually value when no one is watching? What kind of life feels meaningful to me, even if it looks entirely unimpressive to my peers? What are the principles that I am willing to defend, even if it means standing completely alone in a room? When you take the time to articulate your own core values, you create a solid bedrock beneath your feet. External judgment only shatters you when you are empty inside. When you are filled with your own defined purpose, the criticisms of the world simply bounce off the armor of your clarity. Stepping into your sovereignty is an act of immense psychological bravery because it changes your relationship with the world from one of dependency to one of freedom. You stop asking for permission to exist, to speak, to create, and to choose. You no longer walk into a room hoping that people will like you. Instead, you walk into a room simply wondering if you like them and if the environment aligns with your true self. You recognize that your life is a brief, finite flash of light in a vast universe, and to spend even a single moment of that precious time living by the script of a crowd that does not truly know you is the ultimate form of self-betrayal. Your sovereignty is your birthright, and it is time to take it back. True authenticity requires a profound, uncompromising willingness to be completely misunderstood. It means accepting the uncomfortable fact that not everyone is going to get you, interpret your motives correctly, or appreciate your evolution. And that is perfectly okay. We live with a deeply ingrained childlike fantasy that if we can just explain ourselves clearly enough, if we can just find the perfect words to justify our choices, or if we can prove our inherent kindness, everyone will eventually nod their heads in unified agreement and validate our path. But this is an illusion. When you finally decide to drop the persona, speak your mind clearly, set firm boundaries, and pursue the unconventional things that genuinely interest you, some people in your life will inevitably pull away. They might accuse you of changing, distance themselves from your company, or tell you that you are suddenly being difficult, selfish, or unreasonable. You must look closely at what is actually happening in those moments of friction. When someone says, "You have changed," with a tone of disappointment or resentment, what they really mean is that you are no longer operating within the neat, predictable boundaries that were convenient for them. They are reacting to the fact that their remote control no longer works on you. For months, or perhaps years, they grew comfortable with your absolute compliance, your quietness, your habit of swallowing your opinions, and your willingness to put your own needs at the very bottom of the priority list. When you step out of that box and start honoring your own psychological sovereignty, you disrupt the comfortable system they built around your self-betrayal. Their critical reaction is not an objective assessment of your moral character. It is a direct response to the inconvenience your growth has caused them. Being misunderstood by people who only loved your mask is not a catastrophic failure. It is an absolute necessity. In fact, it is the ultimate proof that the mask is finally coming off and that you are beginning to live in reality. Think of the immense, exhausting labor required to keep everyone around you perfectly comfortable and fully aligned with your choices. To avoid being misunderstood, you have to constantly explain your actions, over-justify your boundaries, and soften your truths until they lose all their substance. You end up watering down your personality to make it digestible for people who lack the capacity to see your depth anyway. The moment you stop managing their perceptions and accept their confusion or disapproval, you instantly reclaim an incredible amount of mental freedom. This clearing of the space is often painful, but it is entirely healthy. It acts as a natural, psychological filtration system for your life. When you stop conforming, the people who were only attached to your utility, the ones who liked you because you never said no, never made waves, and never demanded space, will naturally drift away or filter themselves out of your inner circle. This can trigger a deep sense of loneliness and grief, but it is a clean, honest pain. It is the necessary emptiness that must occur so that genuine, authentic connections can actually form. A relationship that requires you to continuously edit your soul just to keep it alive is not a true relationship. It is a hostage situation. True connection can only exist when you are fully visible, which means you must be willing to let the wrong people walk away so the right people can eventually see you. To tolerate the reality of being misunderstood, you must develop a deep, internal loyalty to your own truth. You have to reach a point where you care more about whether you are being honest with yourself than whether someone else agrees with your lifestyle. When a neighbor, a colleague, or an extended family member misinterprets your quietness as arrogance or your boundaries as hostility, you must resist the urge to rush in and correct their narrative. You have to let them be wrong about you. Let them tell their stories. Let them whisper their assumptions. Their understanding of you is limited by the quality of their own internal lens, and it is not your job to fix their eyesight. When you anchor yourself in this clarity, being misunderstood ceases to feel like a threat to your survival, and instead becomes a badge of honor, signaling that you have finally chosen authenticity over popular vote. A real, meaningful, and authentic life is not a frictionless life. Many of us spend decades trying to engineer an existence that is entirely devoid of conflict, tension, or social resistance. We try to live so perfectly, so quietly, and so agreeably that we never create a single ripple in the water around us. We walk through our workplaces, our homes, and our communities with our heads down, constantly smoothing over potential disagreements, swallowing our objections, and adjusting our pace to match the slow, safe rhythm of the crowd. We convince ourselves that this total avoidance of tension is a sign of peace, maturity, and emotional intelligence. But it is not peace. It is a state of psychological paralysis. Friction is not a malfunction in the system of life. It is an inherent, necessary, and vital part of becoming a distinct, fully realized individual. When you finally stop conforming to the expectations of the collective, you will inevitably create friction. And that exact point of friction is where your true strength, your unique character, and your authentic self are forged. Think about how this works in the physical world. In physics, friction is the resistance that occurs when one object moves relative to another. Without friction, tires cannot grip the pavement, a shoe cannot find traction on the ground, and no forward momentum can ever be generated. The exact same law applies to human psychology. If you never encounter any resistance from the world around you, it means you are not actually moving forward on your own path. It means you are simply being carried along by the momentum of the crowd, drifting aimlessly down a current that someone else directed. Every single time you stand firm in your truth during a deeply uncomfortable conversation, every time you choose an unconventional career path, despite the skeptical glances and hushed whispers of those around you, and every time you look someone in the eye and deliver a calm, firm no, without offering a desperate string of excuses, your psychological muscles grow stronger. You are intentionally entering the friction. In those high-tension moments, you are testing the structural integrity of your own boundaries and your own values. You prove to yourself in real time that you can survive the raw discomfort of someone else's disapproval. You learn that a cold look, a biting comment, or a wave of collective criticism cannot actually break you. The fear of judgment does not disappear because you magically wake up one morning completely fearless. It disappears because you have repeatedly stepped into the friction and realized that judgment has zero power to destroy the core of who you are. Furthermore, we must recognize that a complete lack of friction always indicates a deep state of self-betrayal. If everyone in your life is permanently happy with you, if your colleagues, your friends, and your extended family members Never experience a single moment of discomfort or challenge from your actions. It means you are actively hollowed out. It means you are sacrificing your unique insights, your valid boundaries, and your genuine desires just to act as an emotional cushion for the people around you. You are absorbing all the tension within yourself, turning that friction inward where it manifests as chronic resentment, physical exhaustion, and quiet despair, just so the external environment can remain pleasant. This is an unsustainable trade. You cannot keep setting yourself on fire simply to keep the people around you warm. Embracing the friction means accepting that discomfort is the exact currency required to purchase your freedom. It means walking into a room knowing that your presence, your honesty, or your choice to live by your own metrics might cause an immediate wave of tension, and being completely at peace with that reality. You stop trying to diffuse every difficult moment or fix every awkward silence. When you express an unorthodox perspective in a meeting and the room goes quiet, you sit in that silence without frantically backpedaling. When you tell a family member that you will not be attending an event because you need to honor your own mental health, you allow them to experience their frustration without rushing in to apologize. You allow the friction to exist out in the open, recognizing it as a sign of clean, honest boundary testing. This shift in perspective transforms how you view the challenges of daily life. Disapproval is no longer a catastrophic signal that you are doing something wrong. It becomes a normal, expected indicator that you are finally doing something right. It is the natural, static electricity generated when a sovereign individual rubs against a conforming world. When you stop running away from this tension and instead learn to breathe through it, you reclaim your internal power. You realize that the boundaries of your life should be drawn by your own hand, not by the comfort levels of the people who wish to keep you predictable. True strength is found when you are willing to let the world be uncomfortable with your truth, rather than letting your truth be crushed by the comfort of the world. Ultimately, the choice comes down to a fundamental decision that no one else can make for you. You can spend your remaining years on this planet trying to manage, curate, and manipulate the perceptions of people who are far too busy worrying about their own lives, their own masks, and their own insecurities to ever truly see you anyway. Or you can make the terrifying, exhilarating choice to step fully, completely, and unapologetically into your own reality. It takes immense psychological courage to drop the persona, to face the potential disapproval of the crowd, and to embrace the hidden, messy complexities of who you are. But the reward at the end of that difficult path is total, uncompromised psychological freedom. When you finally stop asking the world for permission to exist, you stop looking at your life through the lens of fear. You realize that the only judgment that truly matters at the end of the day is the one you deliver to yourself when you look back at how bravely or how safely you chose to live. Think about what it actually looks like to live on your own terms in a world that is constantly screaming at you to conform. It means waking up in the morning and anchoring your decisions in your own internal compass, rather than checking your phone to see what the collective timeline demands of you. It means choosing a career path, a lifestyle, or a creative project because it genuinely makes you feel alive, even if your peers look at it with complete confusion or lukewarm indifference. When you live on your own terms, you stop participating in conversations that bore you just to appear polite. You stop buying things you do not need with money you do not have to impress people you do not even like. You stop treating your life as a marketing campaign designed to rack up points in a game of social validation, and you start treating it as a rare, sacred experiment in consciousness. This shift changes the very texture of your daily existence. The persistent, low-grade anxiety that used to haunt your social interactions begins to evaporate. You no longer walk into a room wondering if you are doing enough, saying the right things, or wearing the correct outfit to blend in. Instead, you occupy your space with a quiet, grounded solidity. You recognize that your presence is non-negotiable. If people appreciate your authenticity, you receive their warmth with gratitude, but you do not depend on it to keep your self-worth afloat. If they meet your true self with criticism, distance, or misunderstanding, you let them have their reactions without feeling the need to alter your shape to win them back. You understand that your time on this earth is a finite, rapidly ticking clock, and to waste even a single hour of it living out someone else's script is a profound tragedy.